we grow as individuals, it helps us to then have impact in society. You are because I am. The term Ubuntu. How do we leave our egos at the door?
Mr. Glenton, thank you so much for taking the time to once again have a nice conversation. Last time we spoke was IBTM. Very
Yeah.
briefly, we spoke about sustainability and what South Africa is doing about it. But this time, I wanted to get a little bit more insights from you. I felt that on that conversation, you're a very well-structured man. You're a leader that really, thinks forward and has structured plans to make things move around the industry. And I find that inspiring. Thank you so much for giving
Okay.
me this time. Okay.
Problem anytime, anytime.
All right, so one of the ways that I really enjoy starting these conversations with leaders is kind of understanding their purpose. Like, what is your purpose in life, and how do you make that a reality?
I think for myself, it's about individual growth, and not necessarily my growth. So mine would be that as I grow, people that I surround myself with and people I work with, and I think our relationship is probably going to be one of those, that as a collective we will grow based on commonalities in what we want. Obviously, first career-wise, and then from a personal perspective. So I think the more we grow as individuals, it helps us to then have impact in society. Because if you always thinking about self first, that hampers growth. But if you're thinking about just growing and helping others, it makes life a little bit easy. So mine is, I think, if I reflect on our particular meeting, ours was by right time, right place, right conversation. And
That's
that would allow sort of the connectivity, which is the beauty of our industry that we're in. I always say most of us, well, people that I've come across are not always necessarily, if you think about how we get into our particular industry, we're not always people, but in a weird way, this people industry makes us people in that regard. So I think for me, it's always about the individual growth that one can sort of pass on to another individual, no matter where you are in the world.
how's your context influenced you towards that? How has the South African surroundings and context led you to think that collaboration and thinking about others and working together, it's part of your purpose?
Well, I think for ourselves, in terms of our own country history, there was a phase that we had gone through, and the word Ubuntu is one that comes to mind. You are because I am is a concept that many of us live by. And as I think when one looks at what's happening globally at the moment and all the geopolitical issues that we stand and are going to have to withstand in the current context of our lives, our own history as South Africa is one that we had lots of hardship, lots of conflict, most of that based on race and different ideologies. So, if you are because I am, the term Ubuntu in effect means that we have to then take hands and work together. So, I think that particular grounding and many of our family foundations, irrespective of your religious background, your racial intent or your ideology, there's some core within the context of family life and how that then influences you on a day-to-day basis. And it's a and I think as I had said at the onset of our conversation, I think when you finally come to my country, you'll get a sense of some of the things that I'm sharing with you. And you'll fall in love with the country. So I always say to my colleagues, I know that news can be depressing at times, but not all the news that comes out of South Africa or Africa is as depressing as it's sort of been portrayed within mainstream media.
That I completely agree with you. One of the things that I always tell people every time they ask me how my experience was in Africa is that I was able to throw down a lot of paradigms and stereotypes and ideas that I had about Africa that I was fed through obviously the news, which honestly, the news are just focused on keeping us a little bit afraid.
Yeah.
But being finding myself feeling even safer than back at home and in many other places around the world. That just really made me feel like home. I was initially planning to stay for a month or two, and I ended up staying for 5 months already. So
Yeah.
yeah, it really grew into me. I also tried opening up an enterprise over there, a company and everything. Didn't go as planned, but definitely I feel inspired by that sense of community that Africa usually brings to the table. Now, I wanna understand a little bit more in terms of leadership within the events industry. What's the current mindset in South Africa? How are leaders coming together from our industry in South Africa?
The beauty of where we at the moment, and it's call that we had yesterday. So at an association level, and particularly at a company level as well, the conversation at the moment is about how do we consider the industry in 5, 10, 15 years time. And ideally, for most of our association member companies or companies that have been well established, figuring out how best do we find the collaboration sweet mark. And in terms of finding that, we then have to then start having frank conversations as to what are the needs currently and potentially what are the future needs in that regard. So the leadership mindset at the moment is collaboration through unison and action. Because I think most of us across the world that are sort of listening to the podcast and watching the video would go like, well, we've had collaboration before, but how do we actually get this done? So from a South African perspective, during the pandemic, which is about 5 years ago this month for ourselves, we had formed a very loosely collaborative effort called the South African Events Council. And through that, we were able to literally build the readiness for opening and operating within the pandemic. Out of that, a lot of good and bad lessons were learned. And that's why our conversation that we activated yesterday was to figure out how do we then formalize and have a singular voice within the meetings and events space. So at a leadership level, the most difficult conversation that we finding quite easy to have is how do we leave our egos at the door? How do we focus on a collective agenda that speaks to growth and sustainability of our industry? Now, for leaders, whether you're chairperson of the board, a CEO of an organization, a big conglomerate, we're asking you to check yourself and consider the industry from a outsider perspective and saying what is best for the industry. And having done that in the last couple of weeks and very early in this particular calendar year, we're quite hopeful that in the next sort of 24 to 36 months, we'll have a singular body. That when you are in the industry at a membership level, at a company level, you'll find one particular grouping of individuals that can assist you on a number of layers. So whether that's skill, that's education, whether you are in the exhibition industry, whether you are in the incentive industry, whether you're in the conference or meeting space, you'll be able to get all of that off one institution or organization. And that's quite a bold move that we are busy with, because in essence, like the organization that employs myself, the Southern African Association for the Conference Industry, it's been around 38 years this year. So for the last 38 years, you've built institutions, you've built institutional memory, you've built programs. You're asking this old lady, almost as I said yesterday on the call, you're asking the old lady to step aside to form something completely new for the future. Now, doing that now, the reflection is in 15 years' time, the next generation will go, that was actually a damn good thing that they did there. Or they could go, why haven't they done this 15 years ago, for instance? So the complexities of the conversation is an interesting one, because we all are thinking about the future and not the present. The present will help us understand how we need to get to the future. But as I said, if all of us get to the age that we need to step aside and bring the next generation in, what are we leaving behind? And that's really where we are at a leadership level at the moment now in South Africa.
That's very interesting that you mentioned. When I got the opportunity to be in Kenya, and I'm trying to not generalize in Africa because Africa is huge, but I got to experience the rising of the Gen Zs, right? It was a very strong movement in Kenya. And I wanted to know, how are you guys integrating actually into leadership roles and or like education roles or yeah, these new spaces, the younger generations?
Yeah. So what we did 3 years ago in 2022 at our annual conference that we sort of held in Stellenbosch in the Western Cape, we took the bold decision of announcing that we will start working very, very deliberately within the sort of almost like students. So if you're studying at our tertiary institution, you're in your final year, and created a youth council. And at first, when we sort of spoke about it and we presented, not many people understood what we were, what the ultimate goal here was. Well, the ultimate goal was very simplistic for ourselves as people started working with us, is that if you were the final student in 2022, by the time they get to 2025, you would have graduated. You'd have probably been 2, maybe 3 years of actual work, which means that you're now a young professional. And that at a board level for our own organization, we would have gone through one and maybe two cycles of calling for board members to serve on our board. Now, we had looked at it and it was a difficult decision, but we laugh at it for now, because when we looked at the average age of our current board for our organization, you were on the wrong side of, I'll say my 55, I won't say 65, but you were on the wrong side. A lot of gray-haired people like myself. So how do you then bring the next generation in? For us, it's about then building commonality within the student base. So we've got 9 tertiary institutions, because we've got, I think you'll probably call them like states, but we've got provinces or regions. So we've got 9. So every region would have, as a base, would have one. Some of them, like the city where I live in, Johannesburg, we've got five types of universities. But everybody in that 9, in terms of the 9 majors, one or more of them will have a tourism faculty, or some would have tourism and meetings as a faculty. So ours on an annual basis is we go and speak to those faculties. We sit on advisory boards to advise on curriculums in terms of how it's been taught. And we've built a really good pipeline of the next generation, to the extent now that a lot of young professionals would come out of that program. And when we go to our annual conference in July this year, when we call now for national nominations to serve on the board, our current vice chairperson comes out of the program. She was the driver of the program, so she technically, in the way that we've worked it, could then become the next chairperson. And also what we then did at our board level, when you go onto our website, you'll see that we fairly are well represented in terms of the demographics, but at the age level, we've gone like, let's say 55 or 65, right down to about 32, 33 years old in terms of the average age there. Now, some might say that's quite a rapid progression in terms of the next generation.
Mm.
For ourselves, the intent is quite simple. If you are competent enough, if you are skilled enough, and you're wanting to serve at a leadership level, you will be able to then serve at a leadership level. And age shouldn't be your differentiator factor to say, because I'm young, I don't have experience. We go, because you're young and you're competent enough, do you want to serve? Are you,
Mm.
are you ready to serve? And we will then find, as we've done, we will find individuals in our industry that will mentor you, that will work with you, that will highlight good and bad experiences. Because the challenge here for ourselves, and I think it's an industry one globally, we're quite a busy industry. So when we're looking at mentoring a young individual, we're asking for your time. We're asking for you to invest in the future. And I always start with myself first. If people were not interested in driving me or pointing out good and bad, and sometimes think about it, sometimes somebody says, or even your parents would go like, you shouldn't do that, you shouldn't do this. In a work environment, when an older person says that, the immediate response is, oh, you're old. These old ways won't work. However, there's a foundation of how things will work. And I always, as I've been joking with a cohort that came in 2022, I say, think about you now going to the university and speaking to students. They will look at you as an old person, because if you had graduated at 21, 22, you're closer to 25 now. And in
Mm.
5 years' time, you're 30. So figure that out in your head, so that all of us are gonna get old. right? So if you are working in that sort of youth space as we are, it's about finding the sweet spot around, where the knowledge sits in terms of experience knowledge, and where does this new knowledge sit at a theoretical level, and how do you fuse that to then deliver good experiences for for delegates and clients in the eventing space. So ours is as an evolving program from a youth council perspective. And ours is that, as I always share with my colleagues, it's a trial and error process that we've gone through. Do we have the right formula? So most of us will say, well, we've got it in some parts, in others, we will keep evolving as we go along. But it's one in that we, as I said at the onset, we're deliberately doing what we're doing now because we can talk about it. So part of the nuances for this year, our annual conference in July, is there's because what normally happens is when we talk about panels or we bring speakers into conferences, it's an older person speaking about the next generation. So ours is to go, no, that generation will be the panel. That generation will moderate. That generation, the next generation will be the moderator, and there'll be a special guest speaker.
That's a
Because
mind shift change. Like it's a very big change,
yeah,
important
and
one
it's
as well.
important one to do that because remember, and think and look at programs around the world. Many a time, it's not the young people speaking about their challenges. So ours has been a deliberate one where, as I said, it's a trial and error one. It's not been totally perfect in some areas, but because we've done certain things and because we speak a lot about it and people have seen what we're doing, we're finding more and more partners wanting to work with us. And we've also seen, as the years sort of evolved from our side, we've also seen institutions that were not keen for us to come onto campus are starting to like say, listen, can you guys come and do a guest lecture? Can you speak to the students? And last year we were very fortunate with one of that institutions that we did a simulation. So we then build simulations with industry partners to go, look, when you come into industry, this actually is how it works at industry. So we took the curriculum, looked at what the kids were being taught, and then simulated it in the local context, and particularly locally in the area that the institution is based, because ours is that we're quite a practical industry. The meetings and event space
Yeah.
is very practical. You work a lot with your hands, and what you don't also realize is that it is also mentally challenging. You have to be very creative. Besides the people issues that you need to deal with, you need to be really on point and pushing boundaries because it's about
Mhm.
not content, about the experience that you must offer at an
It's
event.
crazy. We're supposed to be octopus, just be resilient, be mindful, but at the same time creative, be risky, not be
Yeah,
afraid of, failure at the same time. So it's a
good. Yeah,
beautiful industry. I really like
100%.
it. So I want to put like a pin on what you're saying right now about the youth and the way you're integrating the youth within the industry currently. To kind of go back a little onto understanding the challenges that right now South Africa is facing. Let's focus on South Africa for now.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
challenges are you guys facing within the industry right now?
I think in some parts we've seen great recovery and good growth. What we also mindful of obviously is the whole issue around the geopolitical space we find ourselves in. I mean, last year our country hosted the BRICS block of countries. This year we're the host for G20. So there within brings so while we've got on average about 220 G20 events that will be hosted in terms of in-person events. We've also got the B20, which is the business component of that. So at the moment, we're extremely busy. So the challenge would be that because we've almost like triple stacked, so we'd have our normal sort of run of events at a national level, whether they are trade exhibitions or their meetings and big conferences, just international conferences as well. We've got B20 and G20 stacked there. So it's a very, very busy period for us. So part of the challenge is that we're going to, as some of us are saying, we're going to feel very tired by the time that we get to the end of Easter weekend or April this year, because there's been almost like a momentum push into from 2024 into 2025. So ours is how do we keep everybody mentally in terms of the well-being really sort of on point at the starting point. So second is that in parts of our country, we still have not seen significant uptake or sort of almost a return from a meetings and events perspective in respect of, where they were in terms of the 2029 numbers. So if you in Cape Town, Johannesburg, Durban, parts of Port Elizabeth, East London, those areas have really seen Stellenbosch as well. They've seen like a real return to it. Our challenges down the line is obviously to bring in new skill and train them up as quickly as possible. And in some parts of our country, we're going to have to add on new venues as well. So that's a nice thing to have as a challenge, is the new venues. And then we really have to be feeling more aggressive in the longer term around our conversion rates of bids that we've put into play. And obviously there's been a lot of talk around, sort of eventing in the sense of the Formula One. I mean, we've got the 2027 Cricket World Cup that's arriving. So that we've done fairly well in many parts. The pipeline for 2025, 26, and bits of 27 are looking quite well in terms of confirmed events that we're having. But ours is always looking at geographical spread, and in that geographical spread, where the opportunity lies. So for us, as I said, skill level quite important in terms of new skill, venues, new venues that come into play, and then obviously around sustainability as well. I think as you and I chatted a few months ago, we're very big on sustainability. So how do we look at the unique selling features of Africa, and particularly South Africa, in terms of what we have to offer? And how do we marry the two at an activity level, but more sustainability? And a lot of our responsible tourism platforms and sustainability platforms is built on the fact that we are really top of mind in respect of what event planners, PCOs, associations, and corporates are looking for when we're delivering these events at that level. So the challenges we have, I think, in the short term, is that we're busy enough, but we're thinking into the future, because G20 is not here next year. So how does that look for those destinations and those venues? And if we into 2025, can we then, as I said, springboard in 2020, into 2027 and 2028? So we, at a national level, are looking to say that we must deliver, but we need to consider where the pipeline sits at the moment. So it's looking good, but there's a lot of work that we would need to do, and a lot of hunting and presentations, and obviously conversion is where we want to. So we're looking to really increase our conversion rate on the bids that we work on. And we've been working with a lot of the convention bureaus and convention bureau teams. We've been working a lot with our members. And we're also looking at within the trade and exhibition space, how do we increase foot traffic and also exhibitors on the floor as well. And ideally, in doing that, at the current moment, there's a review process happening around our total meetings and event strategy. And there's a big component that's looking at live events, sporting events, so that you have a bit of buffer built into that. And we do quite well, particularly Cape Town and Johannesburg does fairly well on some of your international concerts, as a starting base, because traditionally we'd almost see a lag over that festive period, because our summer is in sort of November, December, and January. So it'd almost be like a bit of a dip there. So we want to plug in live events, concerts, international performers, because of the outdoor opportunities we have over summer in parts of our country, that we plug that in there. So if the exhibition and meeting space and bits of the incentive goes almost like through a little bit of a lag there, we've got live events that could cover those areas, because the service providers, whether you are delivering your exhibition outside of your stand building opportunities, the AV, the event planner, the graphic designer, the website designers, there's work opportunities there for yourself. So ours is the expansion of your services, with understanding that as much as you are specializing in a particular area, more and more we're seeing people wanting to work with one service provider that has got a basket of activities across the board. So yes, challenges there, but our big ticket item would be the conversion and a longer tail in terms of our pipeline going forward as well. And obviously, I mean, the perception, as I said, the moment now we're managing the geopolitical aspects that are taking place. And as I think, as we would acknowledge, safety has always been a topical one. And that's to ensure that when you're dealing, particularly on the bids, as we've seen with one or two, Once you have a conversation, once you do the site inspection and you get people to understand, the environment that you will be in, the working with the communities as well. And I always say when destinations speak and we do that without thinking about it sometimes, but we don't tell people about it. But when we look at events with our own national conference or to the venue that we take in, when people speak, no, you must consult the community. My response to that has always been, well, the people who work in those hotels, whether they're the convention bureau teams, whether they are the housekeeping teams, those individuals need to be spoken to first because they come from the community.
Mm.
They live in that community. So if
Yeah.
if they're not sharing to say, listen, the SAACI conference is coming to the event, or they're working with us on it, but they're not excited as we are to be there, then you have a problem. You need to
Mm.
get those people excited because when they go home in the evening or they speak to another client or another association, they go, listen, hey, we hosted these guys, we hosted SAACI, they did this kind of cool stuff. So the more that you are able to engage with your service providers, their staff who represent the community in that particular destination or location, the far better for yourself. We almost try and in a weird way, and I've seen colleagues around the world like think I'm mad when I say this, but understand that outside of that venue, the community does exist, they do exist, but inside that venue are members of that community. So have a conversation with them. I always say have a conversation with the security guard, because the parking attendant, because he goes home in the evening, she
Mm.
goes home in the evening. And so who do they talk to about their day job? They talk to their families, and their families come from the community. So the more engaging you are with your service providers and your partners on delivering on your events, the better for yourself. Way better for yourself.
Okay. Yeah, I did see that when I was in Africa. Now I was talking to Miguel Neves from Skiff meetings. I don't know if you had the opportunity to talk to him, but he mentioned that in Africa there's a lot of potential still to work with associations, and it kind of goes in line with what you're saying. I believe that associations do represent a greater part of the communities as well. How is the work with associations done, and is it successful or is it still a challenge as well?
No, it's been successful. As I said earlier, we almost want to drive that return on investment. Because we as an association, we've got an MOU with ICA.
Mm.
We do quite a lot of work on the African continent with ICA. Um, the I think the frustration that you might sort of sense in my voice is that our conversion rate is quite low. So that's why we want to ensure that we take it from 3 to 5% on an annual basis to try and push it up to 8 to 10% of the association meetings. And in addition to that is what we're looking at from a South African perspective is associations are fundamentally important. And you must be smart in where you pick the associations. Whether at this juncture we're looking quite extensively, and so we're matching it with our industry, economic industries. So obviously mining comes to mind, the automotive sector comes to mind, medical, pharmaceutical areas come to mind. So that would be almost like your base framework, but in the academia space, within those institutions. So when we're on campus, it's also then speaking to the professors, the doctors, the faculty heads at academia level, because a lot of them are writing about research, they're presenting their research papers
Mm.
at an association conference. And by default at times, depending on the size of the association, if I'm from South Africa and it happens as we speak, people will go, we're going to Africa next year. So I'm just there from a South African perspective. I'll go, no, okay, we'll host it in our little, we'll host it in our city or we'll host it on our campus. Some of that happens by default. And it doesn't happen in the way that you and I understand the formal part. So we're doing a lot of work in working in that particular space. And we encouraging destinations so that we encourage the DMOs with their convention bureau teams, ensure that at least once a quarter you are hosting the professors, the doctors. You are telling them about how you can assist and bring the events here. So that's why at a conversion rate, while we fully appreciate and understand the nuances within the association space in terms of the bidding process, the response to the RFP, the site inspection, we need to almost take that across into the academia space. because there within lies a great opportunity. And just in some institutions, you've got like 5,000 staff members. So just think about just converting 10% of that. That to keep your destination busy for at least 2 to 3 years, in terms of delivering the association conferences as well. So yes, without a doubt, for Africa, the association space remains critical. As I said, we've got an MOU with ICA, and we do quite a lot of work with them in terms of speaking about what we can offer as an association through our members and what we've delivered. And critical to that is how best, particularly into the future, as I said, how do we start converting 2028, 29, 30? Because as I try to explain to my to family and colleagues who are not in the industry, I always say the eventing space is in part like an auditor. We can bank, RFP can come out in 2025, but the event can be delivered in 2028. So
Mm,
if you auditing company, you know that for the next 3 years, you're going to audit company A. But in my world, once I've secured the bid, I know that I will deliver it. You can bank it there, you can work towards it, and you can prepare effectively because of the long lead times that we require. But if you're really thinking strategically as to how to hunt, the conversion makes your life a little bit easier for your destination. And you can start plugging and playing in respect of who and what to expect. And obviously the airlines and everybody else in the service lines, at accommodation level as well, they're quite happy to see that for their destinations going forward as well. So yes, associations, without a doubt, we need to be more aggressive in that space. We need to compete more clearly and cleverly, and we need to have more conversations. And also, as I've been saying, from a South African perspective, we should be hosting buyers and association members far more often than what we do at the moment. So
mm.
we'll improve on that in the coming year as well.
I also think that airlines should be a lot more integrated within the conversation. I was talking to Mr. David Peckinpah from Merits, and this
Mhm.
was something that he actually did focus a lot on as well, that airlines play a crucial role within our industry, and especially in Africa, I believe that the ticket prices are a little bit intense, very
Oh, yes.
interesting. So yeah, I think they should be brought into the table, and of course that's gonna come from the hand of the government as well, from the ministries of tourism, from regulators to make things smoother, less bureaucratic. But I want to respect your time, and here in the show we have a tradition, which is the last guest leaves a question for the next one. So. The last guest that we had was Andrea Doyle from Skiff's Meetings.
Yeah.
So her question was, what was your ha moment and how has it changed the trajectory of your life?
So mine, I'd probably say most recently now, because we just hosted Meetings Africa, which is the biggest sort of trade show for our industry on the continent itself. And there was a lot of challenges we had to get the event to basically happen and off the ground. And I had stood on the floor on the Wednesday. And traditionally, the Wednesday by between 11 and 1, that trade floor is almost like, it's busy, but it's like non-existent because everybody starts leaving. And a lot of the buyers and exhibitors start exiting out of Johannesburg. And it was at 3 o'clock and the place was humming. And I'd said to a colleague that we've been working silently. Many people now have become aware of some of the work we did like for many, many hours. And I just went like, this is the beauty of our industry. If you don't tell people about the challenges and problems you have, you'll have moments like we had at that particular juncture on the 26th of February this year. We go like, should we tell them how difficult this thing was, or just let them continue as is? And for the first time in many years, the event closed out, and people were actually literally ushered out of the venue because it was such a cool event. Because everybody didn't know what the challenges were, but came there to do some seriously good business. So that was sort of, I think, my most recent one that I'm holding on to because of at a particular point there was a conversation that said, guys, I don't think we're going to pull this thing off. And then myself, I'd gone like, no, well, let's make it happen. It's an event industry. People are skilled enough. Don't tell them the problems. Just keep telling them what they need to do. Keep telling them how they need to connect. Make sure that buyers and exhibitors meet each other, and we build the frame, and it will happen naturally and organically as well. And that, I think, this year's one happened in such an organic manner that a lot of people are, even the ones that had doubted if this thing will happen, the one they were already looking forward to 2026. So that was my my moment most recently, that I had within our industry, because that's what eventing does to you. It creates a lot of stress. It takes you onto a high, drops you after the event. But if you're not attentive and present enough, you're going to miss those aha moments as well. You definitely will miss them, without a doubt.
Definitely, definitely a testament of patience as well. You
100%,
know?
yeah. No,
All
100%,
right.
yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Glanton. You can leave the question on the chat in a second.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
I really appreciate you taking the time for this. I'm really looking forward to talking to you again.
No, no,
I
it
have a lot of
is.
questions still to talk about with you that I know you'll be able to enlighten us with your answers. Thank you so much, Mr. Glanton. It's a
Sure. No,
pleasure
thanks for
having you.
reaching out. Yeah, no, I'm pleased that you reached out. I look forward to
Hope to
continuing.
have you here soon again. All right.
Okay. No problem. Keep well.
Bye bye.
Bye-bye.